Diane Hullett, and you're listening to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. Today, I've got a really interesting guest, film director Ondi Timoner. Welcome, Ondi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm the director of Last Flight Home. I think that's the film of mine you want to talk about today. Yeah,
absolutely. Ondi, you can read about Ondi online. She's got an enormous number of films, many of them very provocative and digging into issues in unique ways, these kind of documentaries. But this particular film, Last Flight Home, is incredibly personal and making a huge difference in the world for a number of people. So Ondi and I reached out to each other. I think I first heard about the film on Instagram, something like that. And so we're going to have a showing of this film through Best Life, Best Death on October 11th. And Ondi's going to tell us about the film today so we can learn more. So tell us anything you want to kind of give us any background in you or how this particular film got started.
So since I've been a filmmaker for 30 years, and so I was 19 when I started, and I'd say very early on, my motivation was to tell the story of my father. And I just didn't ever think it would be a documentary because there was very little archival footage of his incredible story, but he basically founded the fastest growing airline in the history of the world. And then he was handicapped by a stroke that happened accidentally as a result of his neck being cracked in a massage when I was just 9.5. He was only 53, and he had run like 6 miles that morning. He was in great shape. And so it was really, really a big turn for the whole family. Our lives really turned upside down. And we really came together around him. Mom brilliantly, she had an 11-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old daughter, and a 7-year-old son, and she called us the T team and said, we're the Timoner team. We got to band around dad and support him. And so we became a very close family, I think, as a result of that. But I was always trying to make sense of how a man who had literally been the greatest father, husband, leader, son, brother, every category, he was over and above a normal human. And I was wondering, like, what sense can I make of this accident? And so my whole life, as a filmmaker, I was working on this, and I had a script, in development for 10 years now. And those are the pages you'll see in the documentary on his bed. I set up cameras purely to never forget him again and not forget a single word he said in the last 15 days of his life. He chose medical aid in dying here in California. It was a decision that came as a very big surprise to all of us. First, he was pleading with us to die. We didn't even know the law existed. I don't think in our society we talk much about death. And certainly we didn't. And even though he had just turned 92, I believed him when he's like, I'll be here, I'll see your son. I'll see where Juki goes to college. I just joined in the suspense of disbelief on his end date. And when things took a turn in January of 2021, he was going to have to go to a facility instead of come home. And that was when he said, you know what, I've had enough. And if you love me, you'll help me die. And I think after 40 years of being paralyzed and being the most supportive, positive person any of us ever knew, it was time to support whatever he wanted and needed. And luckily, there is this law in California. It's a very, very compassionate law. And I didn't even know. My brother thought he heard something about it and that we could help dad legally instead of illegally. So we were like, okay, great. There were parameters around it. At that point, it's now a 2-day waiting period. At that point, it was a 15-day waiting period. And so I panicked. I just thought, oh my God, I'm going to lose my favorite person in the world, the center of my universe. And I don't know what life is like I thought maybe, I don't know what life is like without him. And I thought maybe like the earth would open and swallow me whole. Like I just didn't know what was going to happen. It felt very much like uncharted territory. And so I went ahead. Sorry, can we pause for a second?
Pause.
Okay, thanks. So I went to see a therapist because I thought have to film, and yet this is probably a very inappropriate thing to do, and I don't want to hurt my family, and I don't want to mediate my own experience, and am I trying to like hide something, or protect myself somehow? And to my
Right, like,
surprise, she said, if you feel like you should film, you should film.
right.
And that was a crucial moment, and now there's going to be a ring at the door. I kid you not. I see the man walking up the
Ding
driveway.
dong. It's okay. Should we pause while
See
you go
that?
out the door?
Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
Oh my God, pause, please. 3 films, and then you have a picture of my life.
Well, I mean,
Should we
I
just
just
start the answer clean again? I'll just
sure.
say.
Yeah, sure.
So when my brother discovered that there was this law, and that dad could in fact be, for the first time in 40 years, actually the person in control of his own body and life, as soon as that happened, I can't seem to get it. I cannot seem to get anyone to leave me alone. I'm so sorry. Jesus fucking Christ.
Do you have like, children who might wander in next? Really, it's
I
so
don't. My son is in college, but I guarantee you he's going to call. He'll
yeah,
just
probably
call
mine
us now.
too. Yeah, probably mine too. I've one in college and one who's a sophomore in high school, who's actually an animation person, and
Oh, cool.
she's at the Ottawa Film Festival. So I'm
Wonderful.
expecting her to call and be like, "Yeah, mom, we'll make you to talk between noon and 1." So no worries. Well, let's go back this way. Yeah, I can see how like talking to the therapist was a powerful moment, because you would kind of wonder, like, am I making a film to get distance from this? Or,
I wasn't making a film, to be
yeah,
clear. The whole
yeah,
time I was not making a film. I shot it like a film because I'm a documentary filmmaker. I didn't have any thought about missing anything. Like as soon as I decided, as soon as so let's just start the answer again. So when we realized that dad could do medical aid in dying, and that there was going to be a date upon which dad was going to be able to take a medicine and leave this planet, and it was coming soon. It was probably coming within the next 21 days or something. I cleared my calendar. As a daughter, I'm an independent filmmaker, and so I was the one person who during COVID would not be out shooting, was not away. And I was able to be there and really be the quarterback of dad's care. But I also felt this incredibly deep urge to film, and I thought it might be inappropriate. So I went to a therapist and I said, am I trying to mediate this? I don't know if I'm trying to protect myself. Am I going to hurt my family? And she said, if you think you should film, you should film. So I called dad in the hospital and I said, Dad, when you come home to start this process, I'm wondering if I could set up cameras. I just don't want to forget a word that you say from here on. And he said, I instinctively know you're on the right track. I never knew what track I was on. I set up the cameras to document him for personal use. I had 4 cameras, and I had one in another room sort of trained on him, and I put a microphone on him and on whoever was sitting next to him. And the one camera that you see a lot of is actually in another room shooting through a door. So it was very private for anybody who was with him. The cameras were as unobtrusive as possible. I really didn't want to hurt anyone's experience. And what was happening there was so massive, and it was such a profound and sacred space, that it was not distracting to really anybody, it turned out. So that's why the film feels very much like you're just kind of there in the room with us and invited in to be with us. And it's incredibly intimate and real, is because people just forgot the cameras were there. Nobody really knew. And because I've been a filmmaker for 30 years, it was just my way to document the different angles and to have it be unobtrusive as a product of practicing all those years. And it was just sort of how I survived this. As soon as I set up the cameras, it felt like a safety blanket. I honestly was like not worried about forgetting anything again. And I was reading the script to him, thinking fully that that's the film I was going to make. And I was glad to have the cameras up to record his reaction to the script as well. Just kind of one last time, just getting his feedback. Still having no intention of making a doc until he died. And then my sister, the rabbi, said, hey, you have some footage. Would you put together like a memorial video or something, maybe a 5 to 10 minute piece? And I sat down with the footage 2 weeks after Dad died. I don't think I would have opened it that fast. And for a grieving daughter, it was the greatest gift. I was able to be with him. He was alive. He was laughing. He was so sweet. He was everything. His voice was there. His face was there. My mom in Q&As says her one advice to everybody is document. They're like, the whole family is just so happy to have this recording. I had 500 hours of footage. I thought I'd find a few moments for a memorial video. Instead, I stood up a week later with a 32-minute memorial video. That was not like the film that you have seen, Diane. It was a different piece. It was more like a memorial video. But my sister was not happy about that because she had a memorial plan, not a film screening. But she showed it, and the reaction to it, like in the Zoom reception across the world, where everybody was tuning in, people's feelings about death had changed from seeing the film. And it was very, very clear that it was needed, that people needed and need more work like this. And I was enjoying being with Dad. So I just kept going. And the film emerged, by 6 months after Dad had died, there was a film.
Which
It was like, yeah.
so fast. And I love, Ondi, that it's like you set out to make a different movie that was more like about his success and then the change in his life through this stroke. And instead you found yourself really making this incredibly intimate film about a family and him at the center, and medical aid in dying, and what that was like for your family to experience. I found it almost like, it's so intimate to watch as an audience member. You almost are like, gosh, should I be here? Like this is unfolding right in front of me. And he is so likable and so clearly loved. I loved all the people. He made a list and he was like, I'm going to call all these people and say goodbye. And you all facilitated that. And the number of people who spoke so lovingly about him, he just clearly had this huge sphere of influence. And now how incredible that through this film, it's like a whole other level of influence in terms of how people see his experience and the family's experience.
It's absolutely true. I mean, the thing is that he didn't even want to say goodbye to those people. I mean, he just was playing along with us, giving us whatever he could, giving everyone whose lives he touched whatever they wanted before he could find his own peace. And the medical aid in dying piece of this allowed him to have agency over his body for the first time since the stroke. And certainly for terminally ill people everywhere, it gives them agency when they don't have it, when the body's falling apart and they have the ability to choose the day. That is crucial to their state of mind. It gave him hope. It gave him joy. It was wind in his sails, and his humor returned. He would have liked to have died immediately when he was begging us to die in late January. But as you see, the night before he dies, I say to him, wasn't it important to say goodbye to all these people? And he said, very, but look forward, don't look back. Yeah. And the irony of all that is that, he sat behind a door in a suburban neighborhood, ousted from the airline he created, not influencing really anybody except his immediate family, of which he had a massive influence, which, by the way, he came to learn in those weeks. The gift of this also was that all of us got to reflect back on him, the love and the stewardship that he had taught us on how to be good people. And he didn't realize that he was a success. He thought he was a total failure. And that, if he had left the planet thinking that, I don't know if I'd be sitting here right now. Like the concept, how low he was in spirit, how little he felt his life mattered to really anybody but the few of us, was unconscionable. Like it was like not possible for him to leave the planet. I was determined. So I set up that Zoom list and those visits. And then Rachel, my sister, we kind of make a pretty formidable team. Like I set up all that stuff, then she shows up as this sort of spiritual guide and does this vidui with him where he's able to release his shame. And the shame was over losing his money and starting to realize, oh my God, I measured my life wrong. If I measured it by love, I have wildly succeeded. And it's like, it's sort of like It's a Wonderful Life. Like the moral of the story, is really that we measure our lives wrong all along. And that this great man actually was not a failure. He was a great success. And he started to see that with his first flight attendant and his first pilot and all of these people. And then it's just crazy, Diane, because through the film, he has impacted so many people and continues to. We're about to embark upon a tour of the Ivy Leagues, like medical schools, divinity schools, law schools. There's a law called Eli's Law that's being introduced in Congress to make sure that people have equal access to medical aid in dying in states where it is a right. Because right now, you saw I had to put my credit card across the fence to pay for it. There's, people in Congress who have seen it that are like, this has to change, because Dad is such a kindly, tender, funny, and highly intelligent man that by the end of the film, I think you just fall in love with it. I think people just fall in love with him and they get to really look up to him. And so it's like really hard to not understand his decision about medical aid in dying and to not like want to embrace whatever it is that he wants. And so it changes people's perspectives on this very controversial, like ridiculously controversial, given that it's your own relationship with your body and its bodily autonomy at the end of life. It's changing people's minds about that. And that's huge. And even like pulling up to his grave site, we're in the cemetery for the unveiling of his gravestone. This is like a good year after he died because of the pandemic. There was supply chain issues with his gravestone. And so in Judaism, there's an unveiling that happens, and we pull up. As we're driving to the cemetery, he comes on the radio. It's on KCRW NPR. Suddenly he's giving advice to the grandchildren, and we're pulling into the cemetery. My brother's car is pointed this way, and my car pulls in with my mom in it and my wife in it. And we're all sitting there and we're like, wave at each other. And Dad's like 100 feet away in a grave. Yet his voice is literally dispensing advice to across the city of LA. And I just thought, what is death really? Like, is he really gone? Because it doesn't feel like that. Not when I see him all the time in movie theaters all the time. And then people are like, I love your father. I'm like, I'm so glad you got to meet him. That's the magic of film.
That's
Right
the magic
there.
of film, and that's the magic of the intimacy of this piece. And there's also something so powerful as an audience member about seeing his physicality, right? We see his limitations, like right from the beginning. We see how physically, what's the word? He's no longer his physical capable self. It was taken from him in part by the stroke, and then it's really taken from him at the end of his life with whatever complications are happening.
Yeah, it's like COPD and stuff.
Yeah, and you witness that right from the minute you first meet him in the film. And then you watch him slowly decline over those 15 days. And it's palpable, the sense that he's weaker and weaker. And, his spirit is still with us, but his body is going. And there's this incredible scene where you kind of realize, I think you spoke with a cousin who had experience with medical aid and dying out on the steps. Is that right? A cousin?
Mm.
And you say, oh, wait, we've got to make sure this is all going to go smoothly. And you start trying glasses in your dad's hand to make sure he can hold it. And you start experimenting with the length of the straw. And that was a really, I don't know, somehow that was very moving to me. It was, it's like taking it from the theoretical, like he's going to need to be able to ingest this medication, to the super concrete, like, well, what glass can he hold that's light enough that he can get to his mouth? And the way that the film kind of takes us so in such detail into what this entails and what your family goes through is just really, really profound.
It was just interesting because it's not like I was like, okay, now I'm going to film us practicing drinking the medicine, but that was something that they recommended that we do at Faith and Hope Hospice, which is a great hospice. You know, it just because medical aid in dying is legal in California or Colorado doesn't mean that, you know, it's only legal in 10 states, but it doesn't mean that every hospice will do it or that every pharmacy will prescribe it. So it's very, we have like a husky interference on this podcast, but
Good, we have us.
but she, as you can see in the film, she just comes on in whenever she likes. She's just right there when he's talking, doing a second doctor visit. I don't know if you noticed, but
Here comes the dog.
Beatrix comes rolling in. All the animals are, by the way, the best cutaway is just cutting to, you know, a cat. It's a good tip. But yeah, I mean, it was like, I was just filming everything. And that's what happened. And, you know, I left in the end where it is a struggle for him to drink. And it's a really like, you know, somebody said to me once, your film turns into a thriller by the end. And it's like, yeah, it's like an obstacle course, and it shouldn't be that way. It's not fair, you know, that it's that way. It's really, really not fair to people who are weak and dying. And the first medicine slows down your heart, and the second one slows down your breathing. And so now you really can't hold the cup, you know? So it's just a silly process that in Canada, they have a lethal injection, you know, the whole thing needs to, I told Congressman Scott Peters that in Canada, it's a lethal injection. He's like, well, we should be moving to that. I'm like, okay, look, there's a lot to be done in this arena before we get to that. But I left it in so the discussion could happen. And in California, there's now a flavored drink so that it's not as bitter, and it's one drink, not three. And the family member can help now. So there's certain things that have advanced already from the film here. So I'm glad I kept all that in. My mom was like, can you minimize that? Because she was watching it every day for many, I mean, she was watching it last night when I called her to say hi. Mom was watching the film. She spends time with dad that way. So she's watched it over 500 times, you know, and she's like, could you maybe edit that part down so that I don't have to see him suffering like that. It was such hell to go through that and see him suffering. And I said, you know, Mom, we got to talk about this.
It's so important for film goers to see that part, I think.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah, it's just a beautiful portrait of your family and their love for him and his courage and his bravery. And I think, you know, there's a wonderful book by a hospice nurse named Gabby Jimenez up in the Bay Area. She's got a book called Dignity Day, and she really talks about the courage and the bravery and the struggles that a person who chooses MAID has what has gotten him to the point of choosing this. It's not simple. People don't wake up and say, oh, I think I'm done, you know.
No, and you know, over 30% of people who choose it don't use it. They get the medicine, and that gives them a feeling of power, you know, that they're lacking otherwise, a feeling that if they need to escape, that the fear of the pain, that can be alleviated if need be. And that is all that they need. They don't need to take the medicine. But I'll tell you, our whole family is so grateful for medical aid in dying. And I was not making this film to be an activist. I've become an activist after sharing the film with literally hundreds of audiences. And in states where there's medical aid in dying, there's shared stories like ours where everyone in the family had healing closure, where the person who's dying died in a happier, better place than they would have without it. And in states where there's not, or you know, people will walk up even in states where but then their mother died in Florida or something, you know, and died in pain, begging for mercy, and they're still traumatized by that. You know, it made me into an activist to make sure that we pay this forward to other families, you know. And so that's a lot of the work that I'm continuing to do, even though I'm making new films now, including one about the only hospice for the homeless in the country. Thanks to my journey with this and looking at that incredible space where life is almost like a sunset, so bright and so in focus and so just stunning as one is facing the end. Everything that seems to matter most comes to the surface. And so it led me into this hospice for the homeless called the In Between, INN Between. And we've been filming there in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so I'm finishing that film, but simultaneously touring with Last Flight Home still. We'll be in Harvard next week, October 2nd and 3rd in Harvard. And then Yale is November 6th. and then Stanford's December 12th. So,
Fantastic.
and we're adding more all the time. So
Well, I love it. I think that this film is so important. And I think about the lesson, like what you're really talking about here is how, how we die is how we live. And how a parent dies is really like their last legacy, their last gift to their kids. And it's a gift to the family. And sometimes death tears families apart, sometimes it brings families together. It's so complex. But how your dad went towards his death and how he included all of you and how you all included each other and your mom, and just the gentleness between all of you, not that there aren't a few sharp moments, but the overall kind of gentleness of acceptance just really made this, a quote unquote good death, even though it's sad, even
it
though
was, and it was hard at the end, and it was not, it is a process that needs to be streamlined and made and more compassionate, and can be. It's silly, we're of a couple of different veterinarians have walked up and said we're kinder to our pets, but overall the moral of the story is this is a right that every single human being should have. This is a relationship between you and your body. And it's something that is only for terminally ill people. And it just, yeah, I agree with that. With Jimenez up in San Francisco, that writer, it takes a lot to get to that point. This was a man who was so tenacious and such a lover of life and loved being with his family. And despite being so, struggling so much to walk and all of that, he was going to hang in there. It just became untenable for him, and it became very painful to be alive. And he had every right to go. And thanks to him being able to choose the day, we all got to gather around him and send him off. And so we're not traumatized still. We're not, and we're able to face our lives and make our lives all the richer for knowing that they are finite. It's then turning away from death is turning away from life, unfortunately. We have to be able to allow our loved ones who are dying the ability to talk about it with us. And also, let's not, I think the film is as much about how to live as how to die. And I learned all this stuff while making it. It's not like the reason I had to make the film is because it was the most profound learning experience of my life on so many levels about how to live also. And how to support your loved ones as a family through anything, like our improvisation or Rachel's spiritual lessons, whatever happened there was so important and such a discovery for me as well, that it felt almost wrong not to share it. It was like, I've spent my career going out with a camera, learning whatever I can learn, and then sharing what I learned with people. And here was this, the biggest one of all, the biggest, most universal. Every single person dies. Every single person loses their loved ones. And I'm going to sit on this. It didn't feel right. And my sister was at first really, really not a fan of us sharing it. And she came around. She is so happy that this film is out there. She has heard from literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. People have joined her congregation. Like she had a screening there for 550 people with a popcorn truck. And it was against Reform Jewish law when the film came out, to help a person die. And they've changed their opinion. So it's just, it's been a really transformative experience, not just the losing of dad and the making of this film, but the sharing of it, and it just keeps continuing. Somebody said to me, this is never going to end.
So I just love hearing this.
What a blessing, right?
Yeah, what a blessing, and what an important lesson, that you were able to take the super personal and make it super universal. That really, really is awesome.
I think it just is super universal. Everyone gets to meet our family, and some people say they feel like voyeurs, and I just want to say, don't feel that way. We knowingly shared this film. We love the film and we welcome you to be in our family and see the film. But the other thing that happens is people transpose their own family on top of ours, and they get to play out the end for themselves and for others. And that is a sort of imagination therapy that and sometimes it's the death that happened already and it didn't go well. And so many people have come up to me and been like, I have carried such pain about the death of my father or mother or husband, or my dad turned really mean at the end. You know, it was not like your dad at all, but somehow that film healed me. Somehow it made me feel better. I asked another woman I was talking to on a podcast who's a therapist. I said, why are people saying that it helps them even when they had such a different experience? And she said, it's called imagination therapy. Like when somebody goes through a traumatic event, we often have them reimagine it going differently. And in this case, they get to be in your family and reimagine a terrible open wound and heal it somehow. So that's just, I mean, it just is like my dad's gift to the world, and it just keeps giving.
Your
And I
dad's
just
gift.
really hope he's right and that he's watching, you know,
Yeah,
I really
yeah, yeah,
do.
yeah. He said he would be looking down. Well, your dad's
I hope
gift is
so.
your gift. So, thank you for taking those 500 hours of raw film from camera angles in your parents' living room and, the kitchen, and turning it into this beautiful film. I
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for your time, Ondi, and I
Thank
really
you.
look forward to this showing I'm going to have on October 11th,
Yep.
and
I'm going
invite
to pop
you.
in and say
That
hi.
open to the public. So invite
It is
anybody
open to the
to reach
public.
out. Oh,
Great.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
will, I'll definitely come on and come on Zoom and say hi.
Yeah, we'll have a
Huskies with
Q&A at the
huskies
end.
and doorbells and whoever's over here, but I'll be back. I'll come
All right.
join.
Terrific. Thank you for
Thanks,
your time,
Diana.
and thank you for this beautiful film called Last Flight Home. Where can viewers see this film?
Oh,
They can watch it with me on October 11th and listen to you add some tidbits to it, but it is widely available.
yes, it's on Amazon. If you're an Amazon Prime, or you can just buy it on Amazon, but I think for Prime it's free, and it's on Paramount Plus. And I
Fabulous.
hope it'll go on airplanes soon. That was supposed to happen. So I've got to check up on that.
Wow.
And then on
Awesome.
our website, we, have this ongoing impact campaign, and we do try to keep it current in terms of dates that are coming. So yours should be up there if it's not, but, for the Harvard screening at the Divinity School, that's open to the public, in Massachusetts, where the law is close to turning, there. And it's, at Yale, I believe it'll be open to the public in New Haven. So keep an eye out. At Stanford, it's going to be up in the Bay Area. It'll be open to the public. So, and it just continues to play. It plays, regularly at so many different synagogues and different community centers. So you can kind of keep up on it on my link tree on Instagram or on the website. We do try to keep it up.
Right. And the website is Last Flight Home.
It's actually Interloper Films is the name of the company, Interloper Films. If you look up my name, my first name is usually enough to find a lot of stuff. And then you can kind of go down the internet rabbit hole and find it there. But yeah, a lot of people who see it want to share it with people immediately. So I think Amazon and Paramount are probably the best bets right now.
So listeners can find that there or watch it with us on October 11th. And thanks again to Ondi. You can find out more about the work I do at bestlifebestdeath.com. Have a good day.